And it's now our privilege to welcome our honorees for 2022, three top climate scientists whose pioneering research on climate and nuclear war has busted the myth of a so-called limited nuclear war, thought of by war planners as a controlled use of nuclear weapons. Thanks to years of careful investigation by our honorees, we now know that the use of even a tiny fraction of today's nuclear arsenal would disrupt the climate so severely as to cause long-lasting worldwide famine that would kill more than 2 billion people. Their most recent work, a landmark study published in Nature Food just this August, has received extensive worldwide media attention. This scientific understanding has been central to our humanitarian campaign to stigmatize nuclear weapons and to ban and eliminate them under the 2017 United Nations Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, the TPNW.
Given the escalating nuclear tensions in Ukraine, security experts warn that we're one miscalculation away from a nuclear Armageddon. And the man-made climate disasters, each eclipsing the one previous in devastation and severity. The fact that we honor three scientists who work at the intersection of climate and nuclear weapons is fitting. So Alan, Lili, Brian, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are thrilled to have you. As a small token of our gratitude, and on behalf of all of us at GBPSR and IPPNW, we ask each of you to please accept this 2022 Award for Global Peace and Health with our profound respect and appreciation for your singular contributions to one of humanity's most fundamental obligations, eliminating nuclear weapons before they eliminate us. And here are the plaques. This is the one disadvantage, or perhaps several, of virtual meetings, but here are your plaques. And thank you so much. And here is Dr. Alan Robock.
So let me now formally introduce our honorees. Dr. Alan Robock is Professor of Climate Science at the Department of Environmental Sciences at Rutgers University and is recognized in his field as a groundbreaking researcher and recipient of numerous awards, including the Jewel Charney Medal from the American Meteorological Society. Professor Robock was also the lead author in the 2007 IPCC report that was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize that year. And along with Alan, we will hear from Dr. Lili Xia. Dr. Xia is Assistant Research Professor in the Department of Environmental Sciences at Rutgers University. She will share some of her thoughts on the work at the intersection of climate change and nuclear weapons. Alan and Lili, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much for honoring us. I'd like to tell you about what we're doing in a short period of time. By the way, Lili, Brian, and I are all PhDs, so we're all doctors, and we're all professors too. So it's nice to have medical doctors recognize us. So I'll talk about, and our work has been sponsored by the Open Philanthropy Project. This is our beautiful planet, but after a nuclear war, it might look like this, with a cloud of smoke covering the northern hemisphere, moving to the southern hemisphere and blocking out the sun. If there's enough smoke, it would produce a nuclear winter. Temperatures would get cold, dry, it would be dry and dark at the surface, there'd be more ultraviolet radiation, and this would certainly affect crops. Temperatures would get below freezing even in the summertime. We've known this for decades already, but we wanted to ask the question, so what? How will that affect us? How many people might die from this? Now, on the left is a picture of the mushroom cloud of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. And on the right is what we call a pyrocumulonimbus smoke cloud. It's a thunderstorm that was produced by the fire that burned, that was started by the atomic bomb. It has thousands of times more energy than the initial atomic bomb, and it pumps smoke up into the upper atmosphere. This is what causes the climate change. So we asked the question, what if India and Pakistan had a nuclear war? These are two new nuclear states, imagining a skirmish in Kashmir. And when we started doing that part of the work 15 years ago, we thought that was the place most likely to have a nuclear war. And we calculated different scenarios. How many bombs would they use? What would be the yield, the explosive power, and how much smoke would they produce? And we used the units of teragram, which is 1 million tons. So India and Pakistan could produce different amounts of smoke depending on how many bombs they used. US and Russia could produce 150 teragrams of smoke. Here's a movie of where the smoke would go for a very small 5 teragram war between India and Pakistan. On the left is a graph of the atmosphere. The solid line here is the tropopause. We live down here where there's rain. Up here in the stratosphere, there is no rain, and the smoke would be heated by the sun, lofted up, blown around the world, and last for many years, and that would block out the sun. War between the US and Russia would produce much thicker clouds of smoke. So we looked at what would happen for a war between US and Russia, and this is how the surface temperature would change a year later in degrees Celsius. It would be huge amounts of cooling. And we looked at a couple places where there are agriculture, Iowa and Ukraine. This is what we did 15 years ago. And here's a graph of how the surface temperature would change in those places. So the black line is the normal minimum temperature. In the summer, it gets warm, 25 Celsius, 70 or 80 Fahrenheit, below freezing in the winter. But after a nuclear war in the Ukraine, temperatures would plummet below freezing and stay below freezing for several years. Clearly, you couldn't grow crops there. In Iowa, the same thing would happen. And the question is, how much would this affect food? How would this affect us? And that's what our recent work is. We looked at the global average temperature that would change for these different scenarios. And for the India-Pakistan ones, you could get between 1 and 5 degrees Celsius cooling for 5 years. 5 degrees Celsius or Kelvin is what happened during the last ice age with mile-thick ice sheets covering North America. US and Russia would produce twice as much cooling. So I'll let Lili Xia take it from here.
Thank you, Alan. I'm Lili Xia from Rutgers University. Thank you for inviting me to join this concert and share our new findings on nuclear winter. I started to work on this 12 years ago, in the year of 2010, when I just joined Alan's group for my PhD degree. He introduced me to the research of nuclear winter. I was shocked. That was the first time I realized a regional nuclear war could have a long-term global impact. Then I decided to use a crop model to quantify nuclear war impact on agriculture production. In the spring of 2011, during a geoengineering meeting, I met Brian. I showed him some preliminary results of Chinese rice response to a nuclear war between India and Pakistan. I still remember that Brian told me, "This is an important study, you should continue." And yes, I continued. So here, I would like to share with you some of our most recent findings. This August, we published our paper on nature food, global food insecurity and famine from reduced crop, marine fishery, and livestock production due to climate disruption from nuclear war soot injection. This is a 2-year effort of a large group of people with a wide range of expertise. You can find the paper in the August of Nature Food. As Alan mentioned, the world would be cold, dry, and dark after nuclear war. Obviously, agriculture would be damaged, and this disruption would continue for years. Without sufficient agriculture and pasture, livestock production would be damaged as well. We have done the food system analysis country by country, and also we have calculated population without food at the national level. Next, Alan. The map you are seeing now is the percentage of people starving with the regional nuclear war between India and Pakistan. Different colors represent different percentages. Red and brown colors indicate large percentage of population without food, and green means less people starving. Nations in Northern Hemisphere suffer more, especially over the high latitude regions, such as Canada. A regional nuclear war between India and Pakistan would put more than 95% of Canadian population in danger. And in Russia, only less than 25% population would survive. Now let's look at a full-scale nuclear war between Russia, NATO, and the US. Next, please, Alan. This is the same Yeah, this is the same color scale as the previous one. Over Russia, China, Canada, and the US, only less than 5% population would have food supply and possibly survive. Over Southern Hemisphere, the situation is slightly better. There are a couple of countries showing green. For example, in Australia, the temperature reduction is much less, around 5 degrees in the second year after a full-scale nuclear war. Therefore, the main crop in Australia, wheat, shows production increase. You also see some greens over South America. For example, in Argentina, a large percentage of population would survive because Argentina exports crops and livestock a lot. In our study, when we turned off the international trade, available food calorie in Argentina would increase more than 3 times. Therefore, even with crop reduction from the climate change of a nuclear war, Argentina would still have enough food to feed the majority of its population. You may also notice that Iceland is the only green nation over high latitude northern hemisphere. In our study, marine fishery in Iceland would provide enough food in that country when the international trade is off. But this result may change if we consider the sea ice expansion after nuclear war. With those country level data, we added them up, and here, next slide please, Alan. The table shows the global population killed under different nuclear war scenarios. Suit injections of 16 telegram and 37 telegram are for a nuclear war between India and Pakistan with different weapons used. And the suit injection of 150 telegram is for a nuclear war between Russia, NATO, and the US. The second last column shows the direct fatality. It increased along with the weapon yield and the number increase. But the direct fatality is much less than the number of people without food. Even with 215 weapons, 1 to 2 billion people can die from starvation, and more than 5 billion people die from a Russian, NATO, and US war. So with those terrifying and sad results, I hope our study can help reducing the number of nuclear weapons. And I hope our next generation can live in a world without worrying nuclear war. Thank you.
So I just wanted to end by telling you what Beatrice Finn said when she accepted the Nobel Peace Prize 5 years ago, partly because of the work that we've done. She said the story of nuclear weapons will have an ending, and it's up to us what that ending will be. Will it be the end of nuclear weapons, or will it be the end of us? One of these things will happen. The only rational course of action is to cease living under the conditions where our mutual destruction is only one impulsive tantrum away. So I hope we learn from this to keep our planet looking beautiful like this for many, many years to come. And if you want more information about our work, you can go to our my website, or just look up my name on Google, and all the paper, this paper or PowerPoint is all available. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Alan and Lili. Finally, we're going to hear from Brian Toon, who's a professor of atmospheric and oceanic sciences and research associate in the Laboratory for Atmospheric and Space Physics at the University of Colorado at Boulder. Brian, welcome.
Thank you for inviting me and my colleagues, Ali and Lili, to join you for your concert and to tell you about our latest work on nuclear winter. Your invitation took me back almost 40 years to the mid-1980s. In some ways, it was the best of times. I was a lot younger and had a huge range of exciting scientific problems to work on, ranging from the extinction of the dinosaurs by an asteroid impact to the ozone hole to nuclear winter. My oldest son was born then. The Vietnam War had faded into dismal memory, and despite many regional conflicts, there was a relative absence of large-scale war. I saw a bright future for myself, but it was also the worst of times. The Soviet Union had built a wall to prevent its Russian citizens from leaving and to entrap much of Central Europe, including Eastern Germany. There were 70,000 nuclear weapons and a constant threat of their use. Then Dr. Chazov of the Soviet Union and Dr. Lone of the US presented the acceptance speeches for IPPNW's 1985 Nobel Peace Prize. At that time, it was thought that a nuclear winter might kill most of the Earth's population through year-long sub-freezing temperatures at mid-latitude and consequent agricultural failure across the globe. Even ignoring nuclear winter, Dr. Chazov noted that hundreds of millions would die from blast and radiation, and that the medical community would be unable to take care of all the injured. He said, true to the Hippocratic Oath, we cannot keep silent, knowing what final epidemic nuclear war can bring to humankind. My colleague in the discovery of nuclear winter, Carl Sagan, continued the medical analogy, saying, it's elementary planetary hygiene to clean the world of these nuclear weapons. He was able to communicate directly to the public, to Congress, and even to the Soviet Politburo that nuclear winter would devastate the world. Carl, IPPNW, Russian scientists such as Gerasimenko, and others informed Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev of the catastrophic consequences of nuclear war, and they agreed to reduce nuclear weapons. Every U.S. president and every Russian leader since has continued these reductions up to the present, but now further reductions are stalled. Today, in many ways, is the best of times. We can communicate and travel worldwide with little effort. The world is richer and better fed than any time in history. A new rocket has been developed that will soon allow the first settlements on the moon, and then allow us to visit Mars. And thanks to your rapid development of new vaccines and other medical technologies, a pandemic is near defeat. Nevertheless, it's also the worst of times. As Alan and Lili will explain to you, we have found that nuclear winter is even worse than we thought in the 1980s. Political leaders seem not to remember the recent past or understand the dangers of nuclear war. In Russia, geographically the largest country in the world, but heavily dependent on fossil fuels for its economy, the leader has dreams of new empires, reconstructing the Soviet Union, and is developing horrible new weapons of war instead of diversifying his economy. In China, a rapidly developing country bringing millions out of poverty and suddenly a leading industrial power, the leader has dreams of expanding his empire and is expanding his nuclear arsenals rather than investing further in his country's astounding growth. India and Pakistan cannot resolve their differences over Kashmir and are rapidly building up their arsenals, likely to soon be just behind the US and Russia in the number of their nuclear weapons. Wouldn't those funds be better spent on other things? North Korea, Iran, and probably others are developing new nuclear arsenals. Yet North Korea is a failed state with a starving population. Couldn't it spend its resources in better ways? And the U.S. is equally part of the problem. Given hundreds of billions, or even $1 trillion in the Obama administration to refurbish the nuclear arsenal, the U.S. is also developing new capabilities. What a waste of money for weapons that can never be used and will just rot in the ground. Why don't we pay for improved health care or more accessible education instead? New weapons are shortening the warning times between launch and detonation. We may soon face a situation in which warning times, already only tens of minutes, will be so short that artificial intelligence will be used to detect an attack and decide if we go to war. I don't know about you, but my computer, which has been tested by millions of users, still fails on a regular basis. I hope it is never used to decide the fate of humanity. Perhaps the time is not quite right for new treaties because of the war in Ukraine, but it soon will be. Hopefully IPPNW will be ready to again inform the world of the dangers we face and to encourage political leaders to begin again to reduce nuclear arsenals, to stop the development of even more horrible instruments of destruction, to remove weapons from alert status, and to solve disputes without resort to war.